The night I found my daughter sleeping inside a broken-down car behind the Pet One railway station, something in me died and something else woke up. It was a Thursday in late June, the kind of Wellington evening where the southerly cuts through your jacket like it has a personal grudge against you. I had just stepped off the 7:15 train from the city after visiting the specialist about my knee. The platform was nearly empty. Most sensible people were already home, warming their hands around a cup of tea, watching the news. I was not sensible that night. I decided to take the shortcut through the car park behind the station, the one that runs along the old warehouse buildings near the waterfront. That was when I saw the car. It was a faded silver Corolla, parked at the very edge of the lot where the overhead lights barely reached. The windows were fogged up. At first, I thought nothing of it. People park everywhere these days. But something made me slow down. A shape in the back seat, curled up under what looked like a sleeping bag. A thin arm hanging off the edge of the seat. And then I saw the hair. Long, dark auburn hair spilling across the headrest in a way that hit me somewhere deep, somewhere I could not name at first. I stood still for maybe 10 seconds, though it felt like an hour. My chest tightened. My legs felt heavy, as though the pavement had turned to mud beneath my shoes. I walked to the car and pressed my face against the rear window, wiping the condensation away with my sleeve. And the world stopped. It was Haley. My daughter. My only child. Lying in the back of a car like she had nowhere on this earth to go. Her face was thinner than I remembered. Her cheekbones were sharper. There were dark circles under her eyes that I could see even in the weak orange glow from the distant street light. She was wearing a hoodie I did not recognize and a pair of jeans that hung loose on her frame. One shoe was missing. The other was untied. I knocked on the window. Softly at first, then harder when she did not stir. She opened her eyes slowly, blinking, confused, and when her gaze found mine through the glass, her face crumbled. Not surprise. Not relief. Shame. Pure, paralyzing shame. "Dad," she mouthed through the window. She did not open the door. I tried the handle. It was unlocked. Cold air rushed in and I saw her flinch from it, pulling the sleeping bag tighter around her body. She smelled of damp clothes and something stale, like the inside of a charity bin. My daughter. The girl who used to smell of strawberry shampoo and grass stains. "Haley," I said, and my voice came out rough, broken, like it belonged to someone much older than 67. "What are you doing here?" She shook her head. She could not speak. She just pressed her hand over her mouth and cried without sound, her shoulders shaking in that terrible, silent way people cry when they have run out of the energy to make noise. I did not ask again. I did not need to. Not yet. I reached in, took her arm, and helped her out of the car. She stumbled against me, and I caught her weight easily because there was so little of it. She felt like a child again in my arms. A broken, freezing child. "We are going home," I said firmly. "Right now." No arguments. She did not argue. She did not have the strength. The walk to my house took 15 minutes. I live on a quiet street in Eastbourne, just over the hill from Pet One, in the same weatherboard bungalow where I raised her after her mother passed. Haley leaned on me the whole way, her steps uneven, her breathing shallow. She did not speak. Neither did I. Some silences carry more than words ever could. When we got inside, I sat her down on the couch, wrapped her in the wool blanket her mother had crocheted years ago, and went straight to the kitchen. I heated up the pumpkin soup I had made the day before and brought it to her with thick slices of buttered bread. She looked at the bowl like she had forgotten what a home-cooked meal looked like. She ate slowly, carefully, as though her stomach had forgotten how to accept food. I sat across from her and watched. Every spoonful she took was a small victory. Every breath she drew under my roof was proof she was alive. When she finished, she set the bowl down and looked at me. Her eyes were red, swollen, emptied of everything except exhaustion. "He took everything, Dad," she said in a voice so quiet I had to lean forward to hear. Brett took everything. I had not heard that name spoken aloud in over 2 years. Brett Selwyn. The man my daughter married when she was 29, against my quiet reservations, against the uneasy feeling I carried in my gut every time he smiled too broadly and spoke too smoothly. He was the kind of man who always had an answer for everything, who made you feel foolish for asking questions in the first place. Tell me what happened, I said. She shook her head. Not tonight. Please. I just need to sleep somewhere warm. I nodded. I helped her to her old bedroom, the one I had kept exactly as it was since she left. The same faded blue curtains. The same bookshelf full of her old novels. The same photo of her and her mother at Oriental Bay, both of them squinting into the sun, laughing at something I must have said from behind the camera. She lay down and was asleep within seconds. I went back to the kitchen. I washed the soup bowl. I dried it. I put it away. Then I sat at the table with my hands flat on the surface and stared at the wall for a very long time. My daughter had been missing from my life for 2.5 years. Not physically missing in the way that gets reported to the police. She simply stopped calling. Stopped answering my messages. Stopped coming to Sunday roasts. At first Brett answered for her, said she was busy, said she was not feeling well, said they were renovating and she could not talk. Then even he stopped picking up. I drove to their house in Tauranga twice. Once, nobody answered the door. The second time, a stranger answered and told me the house had been sold 6 months ago. He had no idea where the previous owners had gone. I blamed myself. I blamed my stubbornness, my inability to push harder, my stupid respect for what I thought were adult boundaries. I should have broken down that door. I should have rung the police. I should have turned the whole country upside down. But I was a man of my generation. I thought space was respect. I thought patience was love. I was wrong. And now she was here. Sleeping in her old room. And that man was somewhere out there, living whatever life he had built on the wreckage of hers. I did not sleep that night. In the morning, I made a pot of strong tea and a plate of scrambled eggs on toast. Haley appeared in the kitchen doorway around 9, wearing one of my old flannel shirts. She looked fragile but steadier than the night before. The hot food and warm bed had done something. Sit down, love, I said. Eat first. Then we talk. She sat. She ate. She drank her tea. And then she told me everything. Brett had started pulling away about 3 years into their marriage. He became secretive with his phone, hostile when she asked questions, absent for days at a time with excuses about work trips to Auckland or Christchurch. She suspected another woman but had no proof. Then, 18 months before I found her, he came home one evening and told her she needed to sign some documents. Refinancing, he said. The mortgage rate was going up and they needed to restructure. She signed without reading because he had always handled the money. She trusted him. That was her word. Trusted. What he had actually done was transfer the house on Devonport Road into his sole name. A property they had bought together. A property where half the deposit had come from her savings and a small inheritance her mother had left her. He forged additional documents, told the conveyancer she had agreed to the transfer, and within weeks, listed the house for sale. She found out when a real estate agent arrived for an open home while she was in the garden. He told me to leave, she said, her voice flat, mechanical, as though she had rehearsed the words so many times they had lost all feeling. He said the house was his. He said I had no claim. He said if I went to the police, he would tell them I was mentally unwell. He had been telling our neighbors that for months, laying the groundwork. He told them I was unstable. That he was trying to help me but I refused treatment. I gripped my teacup so tightly I thought it might crack. Why did you not come home? I asked. The question I had been holding in all night. Her face twisted. Because he told me you were sick, Dad. He told me you had been diagnosed with cancer and that the stress of dealing with me would kill you. He said your doctor had specifically warned against emotional strain. He told me that every time I thought about calling you. And I believed him. I believed him because I had no one else telling me otherwise. He had cut me off from everyone. I closed my eyes. I felt something fracture inside my chest that I did not think could be repaired. That man had not only stolen her home and her money. He had stolen me from her. He had used my name, my health, my love for her, as a weapon to keep her isolated. Where did you go after the house? I asked. Friends at first. But he had told most of them the same story, that I was unhinged, that I had been violent. People I had known for years started looking at me differently. I moved between flats, backpackers, stayed at a women's refuge in Hamilton for 3 months. Then my money ran out completely. I drove down to Wellington because I thought maybe I could find work here. But the car broke down. I could not afford to fix it. And I ended up parking it behind the station. How long were you living in the car? She looked away. 5 weeks. 5 weeks. My daughter had been sleeping in a car park for 5 weeks while I was 3 suburbs away, making pumpkin soup and watching the rugby. I pushed back from the table and stood. I walked to the window and looked out at the harbor. The water was gray and choppy, the way it always is in winter. The Rimutapa Range was hidden behind low clouds. I am going to fix this, I said without turning around. Dad, please do not do anything rash. I turned to face her. I am not going to be rash. I am going to be thorough. That afternoon, while Haley rested, I sat at my desk and began to work. I opened my old address book, the leather one with the frayed spine, and found the number for Dennis Rasmussen, a retired solicitor who had been my neighbor for 20 years before he moved to Island Bay. Dennis was sharp, meticulous, and owed me nothing except friendship. I rang him. Dennis, I need your help. What kind of help? The legal kind. He listened without interrupting as I told him the whole story. When I finished, there was a long pause. Ross, he said finally, using that measured tone of his, what he did with that property transfer is potentially fraud. If she signed documents under false pretenses, if he misrepresented the nature of those documents, that is a criminal matter, not just civil. I know. You will need evidence. The original documents she signed. The sale records. Bank statements showing where the money went. Any communications. I will get them. And Ross, he added, do not confront him yet. Do not tip him off. If he suspects you are building a case, he will cover his tracks. Understood. I hung up and stared at the folder on my desk. Haley had brought almost nothing with her when she left Tauranga, but she had one thing. A USB stick she kept in her glove box. She had copied it months ago during one of the rare moments Brett had left his laptop unlocked. On it were bank statements, emails, text messages, and a scanned copy of the document she had signed. The one he had told her was a mortgage refinance but was actually a transfer of title. She gave it to me that evening with trembling hands. I do not know why I kept it, she said. Part of me always knew I might need proof. Even when I was too afraid to use it. You were not afraid, I told her. You were surviving. There is a difference. I spent the next 2 days going through every file on that USB. What I found made my blood run cold. Brett had sold the Devonport Road house for $680,000. Of that, over $300,000 was my daughter's equity, her savings, her mother's inheritance, gone. The money had been transferred to an account under a company name, Selwyn Capital Limited, a shell company he had set up 3 months before the sale. From there, it had been used to purchase an apartment in Mount Victoria, Wellington. A 2-bedroom unit with harbor views. He was living in Wellington. He had been living here, in the same city where my daughter was sleeping in a car, spending money that was rightfully hers. I also found messages between Brett and a woman named Kylie. The messages went back 2 years before the house sale. They were explicit. They were calculated. And in one particularly damning exchange, Kylie had written, "Just get the house sorted, babe. We need the deposit for the Wellington place. She will be fine, she has her dad. She has her dad." That line burned into me like a brand. She had written it casually, dismissively, as though my daughter's entire life was just an inconvenience to be managed. On the third morning, I drove to Island Bay to see Dennis in person. I brought the USB, a printed timeline I had assembled, and every scrap of documentation I could find. Dennis spread it all across his dining table and studied it for 2 hours while I drank 3 flat whites and tried not to pace a hole in his carpet. "This is solid," he said at last, looking up over his reading glasses. "Very solid. The transfer document alone could constitute fraud. The shell company adds financial deception. The messages established premeditation. And the fact that she received none of the sale proceeds despite being a registered co-owner. Ross, this is not just a domestic dispute. This is criminal conduct. What do we do? I will prepare a complaint for the Serious Fraud Office. Simultaneously, we file a civil claim for recovery of her share of the property. And I am going to contact a colleague at a family law firm who specializes in financial abuse cases." "How long?" Dennis looked at me steadily. "The legal process will take months. But we can make his life very uncomfortable very quickly." I nodded. "Good." Dennis hesitated. "There is one more thing." "What?" "You said he is living with this woman Kylie in Mount Victoria." "Yes." "Does she know where the money came from?" "I doubt it. He told my daughter a different story for everything. I imagine he told Kylie one too." Dennis leaned back. "It might be useful, at some point, for her to learn the truth." I thought about that all the way home. A week passed. Haley was slowly coming back to life. She ate regular meals. She showered without being reminded. She started reading again, pulling old books from her shelf and sitting in the armchair by the window. One morning I found her in the garden, pulling weeds from around the lemon tree her mother had planted. She looked up at me and smiled, a real smile, the first one I had seen since she came home. But underneath the surface, the damage was enormous. She flinched when the phone rang. She apologized for everything, for using hot water, for eating the last of the bread, for existing. She had been conditioned to believe she was a burden, and undoing that would take far longer than a week. I hired a counselor, a woman and pet one who specialized in domestic abuse recovery. Haley resisted at first, then agreed, then cried for the entire first session. The counselor told me afterward that Haley was one of the most deeply isolated victims she had seen in 20 years of practice. Meanwhile, Dennis and his colleague moved fast. The complaint was filed. The civil claim was lodged. A forensic accountant began tracing the money through Selwyn Capital Limited. And then, 10 days after I found Haley, I received a phone call that changed everything. It was Dennis. "Ross, sit down." "I am already sitting." The forensic accountant found something else. "Brett did not just take your daughter's share of the house. He also accessed her Kiwi saver. He used forged authority documents to withdraw $62,000 from her retirement fund." The room tilted. I gripped the edge of the table. 62,000? Yes. It was withdrawn 8 months ago. The money went straight into Selwyn Capital. I sat in silence for a full minute. Dennis waited. "Ross, are you still there?" "I am here," I said quietly. "And I am going to go see him." "Ross, I strongly advise against. I am not going to touch him. I am not going to threaten him. I am going to look him in the eye and let him know that his world is about to end." Dennis sighed. He knew me well enough to know that tone. "At least wait until Friday," he said. "By then we will have the freeze order on his accounts." "Friday," I agreed. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I went through the motions, cooking meals, reading the paper, watching Haley slowly reconnect with the world. She started walking to the waterfront each afternoon, just short walks, but she was moving. She was breathing fresh air. She was choosing to go outside instead of hiding. On Thursday evening, she sat across from me at dinner and said something I was not expecting. "Dad, I want to come with you." I looked up. "Come with me where?" "To see Brett." "I know you are planning to go. I can see it in the way you have been looking at that folder every night." I set down my fork. "Haley, you do not have to, I want to," she said, and her voice had an edge I had not heard before. Not anger exactly. Something harder. Resolve. I spent 2.5 years being afraid of him. I do not want to be afraid anymore. I studied her face. She meant it. "All right," I said. "But we do it my way. We stay calm. We say what needs to be said. And we leave." She nodded. Friday morning arrived with a pale winter sun and no wind, which is rare for Wellington. I put on a clean shirt and my good jacket. Haley wore a dress she had found in her old wardrobe, dark blue with small white flowers, the one her mother had helped her pick out years ago. She looked beautiful and broken and brave all at once. We drove to Mount Victoria in silence. The apartment building was on a steep street with pohutukawa trees lining the footpath. It was a modern block, glass and timber, the kind of place that costs 7 figures and comes with a parking space underground. We walked to the entrance. There was a security intercom. I pressed the buzzer for apartment 14. A pause. Then a voice. His voice. "Yeah, who is it?" "It is Ross Gallagher," I said steadily. "Open the door, Brett." Dead silence. Then a click, and the door opened. I think curiosity overrode his caution. We took the stairs. 3rd floor. Apartment 14 was at the end of the corridor. The door was ajar. He was standing behind it, half hidden, as though he was not sure whether to let us in or slam it shut. When he saw Haley standing behind me, his face changed. Something flickered across his features. Not guilt. Not remorse. Calculation. He was already trying to figure out what this meant, what angle we were playing. "What do you want?" he said. His voice was flat, controlled. 5 minutes, I replied. "Then we leave." He stepped aside. We entered. The apartment was exactly what I expected. Open plan. Harbor views through floor-to-ceiling windows. A large television mounted on the wall. Expensive furniture. A kitchen with marble benchtops and a coffee machine that probably cost more than my car. On the bench was a woman's handbag and a set of car keys with a BMW fob. Kylie was not there. I could tell from the quiet. Brett stood with his arms crossed, leaning against the kitchen bench, trying to project casual authority. But I saw his jaw working. I saw the tension in his shoulders. "I do not know why you are here," he said, "but Haley and I settled things a long time ago." Settled, I repeated the word slowly, letting it hang in the air. "You call leaving my daughter homeless while you live here, that is settled." She had options. She chose not to take them. Haley inhaled sharply beside me but did not speak. I placed my hand briefly on her arm. "Brett," I said, and I kept my voice low, level, almost conversational, "I know about the title transfer. I know about the forged documents. I know about Selwyn Capital Limited. I know about the $680,000 from the house sale and the $62,000 from her Kiwi Saver. I know about the emails, the text messages, the timeline. I know about Kylie. I know about everything." His face drained of color. It happened slowly, like watching paint dry in reverse. The arrogance slid off him like water. "That is rubbish," he said, but his voice cracked on the second word. "A complaint has been filed with the Serious Fraud Office," I continued. "A civil claim has been lodged in the High Court. And as of 9 o'clock this morning, your accounts and the accounts of Selwyn Capital Limited have been frozen by court order." He stared at me. His mouth opened and closed. I watched his hands unclench and clench again, like a man grasping for something that was no longer there. You cannot do this, he said. It is already done. I will fight it. I have lawyers. Good. You will need them. He took a step forward. His face contorted. For a second, I thought he might swing at me, and honestly, part of me almost wished he would. But he stopped. He stopped because Haley spoke. Brett. Her voice was quiet but clear. Clearer than I had heard it in years. I slept in a car for 5 weeks. I ate from food banks. I thought my father was dying of cancer because you told me that to keep me away from him. I lost everything because of you. My home. My savings. My self-respect. My relationship with my dad. She paused. I could see her hands shaking at her sides, but her eyes did not waver. I am not here to scream at you or beg for an apology. I am here to tell you that I am not the person you turned me into. I never was. And whatever happens next, you need to know that I am the one who kept the evidence. I copied it. I saved it. I carried it with me through every flat, every shelter, every night in that car. You thought I was too weak to fight back. That was your mistake. Brett said nothing. He had no script for this. No manipulation tactic for a woman who was no longer afraid of him. I looked at him one last time. Enjoy your view, Brett, I said, nodding toward the harbor. It is one of the last things you will have. We left. I closed the door behind us gently. No slamming. No drama. Just a quiet click that echoed through the corridor like a full stop at the end of a sentence. In the car, Haley sat perfectly still for about 30 seconds. Then she broke. She cried in a way I had not seen since she was a child, deep, body-shaking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere primal. I held her hand and let her cry. I did not tell her it was okay. It was not okay. But it was the beginning of okay. I am proud of you, I said when she finally caught her breath. Your mother would be proud of you too. She wiped her eyes and looked at me. Do you really think so? I know so. We drove home. I made us lunch. Simple food. Toasted sandwiches and tomato soup. We ate in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that exists between people who have been through something together and come out the other side. That evening, Dennis rang. It has started, he said. Brett's lawyer called. They want to negotiate. Negotiate what? Return of funds. Settlement. Avoiding criminal prosecution. What did you tell them? I told them that is not our decision to make. It is Haley's. I smiled. Good man. Over the following weeks, things moved quickly. Brett's lawyer tried every trick in the book. Delay tactics. Counterclaims. An absurd allegation that Haley had consented to everything. Dennis dismantled each one with the precision of a surgeon. Then something unexpected happened. Kylie contacted Dennis directly. She had found the frozen accounts. She had demanded an explanation from Brett. And when his explanations did not add up, she did her own research. She found the property records. She found the company filings. She found the lies. She left him on a Tuesday. She also gave a voluntary statement to the Serious Fraud Office, confirming that Brett had told her the apartment was purchased with proceeds from a business investment, not from the sale of a jointly owned family home. With Kylie's statement added to the evidence, the fraud investigation accelerated. Brett was formally charged 3 months after I found Haley behind Pet One Station. The charges included obtaining by deception, forgery, and accessing a financial product by dishonest means. The combined value exceeded $700,000. He pleaded not guilty. His trial was set for the following year. But the civil case resolved sooner. Under the weight of evidence and the frozen accounts, Brett's legal team negotiated a settlement. Haley received $412,000, representing her share of the house equity and the full Kiwi Saver amount, plus interest and costs. The Mount Victoria apartment was placed into receivership. The day the settlement was confirmed, Haley and I sat on the porch of my Eastbourne bungalow, looking out at the harbor. The sun was setting behind the hills, painting the water in shades of copper and gray. She was holding a cup of tea in both hands, the way she always has since she was a teenager. "Dad," she said quietly. "Yes?" "Thank you for not giving up on me." I looked at her. My daughter. Thinner than she should be. Older than her 34 years. But alive. Safe. Sitting on the porch where she grew up, drinking tea from the same mug her mother used to use. "I never gave up," I said. "I just did not look hard enough soon enough. And I am sorry for that." She shook her head. "He made sure you could not find me. That was not your fault." "Maybe not. But I should have tried harder. I should have driven to every city in this country if I had to." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "You found me when it mattered." We sat there until the stars came out. Haley is doing well now. She is renting a small flat in Pet One, close enough that I can walk there in 12 minutes. She has a part-time job at a community center and is studying towards a diploma in social work. She says she wants to help other women who have been through what she went through. I believe her. She has always been the kind of person who turns pain into purpose. She sees her counselor every fortnight. Some days are harder than others. She still flinches sometimes when a man raises his voice. She still checks the locks twice before bed. But she laughs again. She calls me every day. She planted a new lemon tree in my garden last week and told me it was to replace the one that died while she was gone. Brett's criminal trial is pending. I do not know what the outcome will be, and I have made peace with the fact that it is not entirely in my hands. What matters is that the truth is on record. Every document. Every lie. Every stolen dollar. It is all there, filed unwitnessed and impossible to deny. He rang me once, about a month after the charges were laid. I almost did not answer. But I did. "Ross," he said. His voice sounded thin. Hollow. Like the air had been let out of him. "Yes. I want you to know that I am sorry. I let the silence stretch for a long time." "That is not mine to carry, Brett," I said. "You need to say that to Haley. And even then, sorry does not rebuild a life." He was quiet for a moment. "Do you think she will ever forgive me?" "That is her decision. Not yours to ask for and not mine to promise." I hung up. I did not feel satisfaction. I did not feel the triumph I had imagined during those sleepless nights. I felt tired. Deeply, thoroughly tired, the way you feel after carrying something heavy for a very long distance and finally setting it down. I am 67 years old. I have lived long enough to know that the world is not always fair, that good people suffer and bad people sometimes prosper. I have buried my wife. I have watched my daughter fall further than I ever thought possible. I have felt the kind of helplessness that makes you question everything you believe about being a man, a father, a protector. But I have also learned this. It is never too late to stand up for the people you love. Not when they are in danger. Not when they have been beaten down. Not when the whole world tells you it is not your fight. It is always your fight when it is your family. And I have learned that justice does not always look like a courtroom or a settlement check. Sometimes justice is a hot meal at the end of a terrible day. Sometimes it is a clean bed in a warm house. Sometimes it is just being there, standing in the doorway, saying, "Come inside, you are safe now." If you are listening to this and you know someone who is trapped, someone who has been isolated and deceived and made to feel worthless, do not wait for them to ask for help. They might not be able to. Go to them. Find them. Break down the door if you have to. And if you are the one who is trapped, hear me when I say this. You are not a burden. You are not broken beyond repair. You are not what they told you that you are. There are people in this world who will cross every city and climb every hill to bring you home. Let them. I am Ross. And this was my story. But before I go, I want to say something to you on the other side of the screen. If this story touched something in you, I would appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. Leave a like if you can. It makes a bigger difference than you might think. And write me a comment telling me what you would have done in my place. I read every single one. Tell me where you are watching from. I love knowing that these stories reach people in places I have never been. Thank you for staying until the end. I will see you in the next one.